I'll call this meeting to order. It is Wednesday, April 16th, 2025, and we're here to discuss the federal immigration lawsuit. And I'll turn it over to our prosecutor, Ben Allen.
So happy to jump in here and do my best to give the BOCC an update on what I think is pertinent for you to know and keep you abreast of what this lawsuit is and what its potential impact or consequences for the county. Just by way of general background and understanding to try to make sense of why this is even an issue. From time to time, within our official capacities as elected officials, we are subjected to lawsuit by outside entities or individuals for our authority that we are given statutorily. In other words, you as an elected official are given power X, Y, or Z by the legislature or by the federal government or by, even at a city level, it may be by the city council that gives you the authority. Some government entity gives you authority as an elected official. And within that capacity of the authority you have, you're subject to suit for carrying out that authority. As a prosecuting attorney, and oftentimes sheriffs wind up in a kind of the same boat, we have a lot of authority. We are delegated by our state legislature in order to carry out certain laws. So our state passes a law and says it's illegal to do X, Y, or Z. The person responsible for arresting you is going to be law enforcement. The person responsible for prosecuting you is going to be the prosecutor. Because of that dynamic, our roles are subject to a higher degree of scrutiny from outside entities or interested persons that don't want us to carry out the authority that we've been given. And as a result of that, I would say that at least a couple of times a year, I get sued in my official capacity as a prosecuting attorney for the county of Shoshone for the mere fact that I have authority to do something. Not necessarily that I've actually done whatever it is I have authority to do, just the fact that I have the authority to do it. Looking back historically, I would say that these were fairly uncommon, but they're starting to get more and more common. And I would say in the last year, I've been named in 3 different lawsuits in the last year alone. And that's probably up from maybe 1 a year, a decade ago. So I would say that the litigious nature of our society is starting to surface, and we're starting to see these things be more and more frequent. The most recent one of which just hit my desk a couple of weeks ago, and it is in response to our state's passage of House Bill 83. Mm-hmm. House Bill 83, and I'll just read for record purposes what the statement of purpose is that the legislature printed. House Bill 83 statement of purpose denotes this legislation, the Idaho Immigration Cooperation and Enforcement Act, or Idaho ICE Act, fulfills Idaho's commitment to support the Trump administration in the identification, detainment, and deportation of dangerous illegal aliens found in Idaho. President Trump has identified a strategic priority of removing from the United States those illegal aliens who, quote, threaten the safety or security of the American people, unquote, particularly those involved in criminal cartels, foreign gangs, criminal organizations, and human trafficking and smuggling. This legislation prohibits the illegal entry into or illegal presence in the state by a person who is an alien from a foreign nation. The legislation also prohibits re-entry into Idaho after deportation. Facilities cooperation between Idaho law enforcement and federal immigration authorities prohibits trafficking a dangerous illegal alien in Idaho and provides for enhanced criminal sentences for illegal aliens committing dangerous crimes in Idaho. So that's the statement of purpose from House Bill 83. House Bill 83 got signed by the governor, I believe the end of March. And within a couple of days, I had a process server at my office doors serving me notice of the lawsuit that I was being sued over my authority to deport illegal aliens under House Bill 83. The bigger issue with these types of lawsuits, and I think it's pertinent for discussion purposes, is the fact that our legislature delegates authority down to local government officials such as you and I, but with that delegation of authority doesn't necessarily have any component of support for us to carry out those duties. In an extreme circumstance, theoretically, the legislature could pass House Bill 83. I could get sued in my official capacity, and since it's in my official capacity, the lawsuit is really against the county. It names me because I'm the figurehead, but if that lawsuit were lost, the county taxpayers are who bear the responsibility for that suit. And we could potentially be put in a situation where we have one of two options. Option number one is we don't want to assume any of that liability, and so we simply allow whoever wants to sue us and win. They take a default, we don't respond and say we don't want to have anything to do with this, and we cede whatever their political agenda is that they're trying to advance. Option two is we say our state passed this legislation, they've bestowed upon us the authority to carry this out, and so we're going to fulfill our obligation as an elected official to enforce or prosecute the laws of our state. So we're going to go ahead and defend ourselves in the lawsuit because we've been named as a defendant. So we would be defending the lawsuit, and by defending the lawsuit, we're engaging in the litigation. And then if we lose, we could be on the hook for the cost and the fees associated with the litigation, in addition to whatever is being sought for damages within the suit. When you analyze that aspect of these types of suits, I think it brings to light the unfortunate reality that as local government entities, when legislation is passed and we are brought into a lawsuit as a defendant for our authority we have to enforce or carry out these laws, there appears to be kind of this missing gap, and that is, in my opinion, what is the state going to do to help us defend their laws that they enacted? Because of this, we did our best to scramble at the end of the legislative session and push through some legislation that would make local public entities eligible to submit requests to our state's Constitutional Defense Fund and have essentially access to either representation and or to financial compensation that could help fund the defense of these types of lawsuits. Unfortunately, that legislation was not successful in making it out of the legislature this session. So it will have to be reintroduced next year, which means that the current state of things is we don't have any defense. Fortunately, in this instance, the Attorney General's office has stepped in because they were also named in the lawsuit. They were named, and 13 counties in the state of Idaho were named. So,
what's the logic of 13 counties?
The logic of 13 counties is the ACLU, who is kind of really the umbrella over this lawsuit. The actual named plaintiff is the Idaho Organization of Resource Councils. It's my understanding that they're working hand in hand with the American Civil Liberties Union, who's the one that's actually responsible for filing the lawsuit. And their logic is that they have identified a handful of individuals that they believe would be subject to deportation that either live in Idaho or traverse through Idaho, and therefore if they run afoul of the new legislation that's passed, they could be subject to deportation. Those individuals they've identified, they argue, have a nexus to the 13 counties that were named. So theoretically, Shoshone County as an individual who is in the country as an alien under the definitions used in the federal code that would be subject to deportation, who has a direct tie to Shoshone. We don't know who that person is. They have not named them. They have asked the court for permission to leave them unnamed. That's part of the litigation already, so there's briefing and oral argument that has already been set on the issue of whether or not they're going to be required to disclose the identity of those people. And that's just one of a handful of wrinkles. These types of cases get complex, and they get complex quickly. And so this case has been active for just a couple of weeks, and already my case file is this thick in just a couple of weeks' time, and I haven't even updated with this week's stuff. So I think it'll probably double after this week. So these things grow fast. As a local government entity, if I'm being candid, we would easily be in over our heads if we had to individually defend this. Fortunately, for a lot of these lawsuits, more than one county is typically named at a time. So in this instance, 13 of us are named together, which allows us to sometimes bond together and identify, hey, can we go out and get a litigation firm to come in and represent all 13 of us collectively? So sometimes that's a solution. In some instances, such as this one in particular, the AG's office has been named as a defendant themselves. And since the AG's office is already manning a defense of this claim, they have agreed to represent the 13 county prosecutors and to provide our defense. That is helpful. That does not satisfy all of the issues. The most prominent of which is we now are defending against this, which means that litigation is moving forward, which means the cost associated with the case is moving forward. And if we lose, we individually are still responsible for those fees and costs. So although we don't have to pay for a defense firm to come in because the AG's office is doing that for us, we're still responsible for the monetary damages if the court sides against us. And so that's probably the scariest part about defending these types of actions. When I spoke to the Senate, so I had an opportunity to speak to the Senate as part of our attempt to pass some last-minute legislation. The senators of the State Affairs Committee were very receptive to my comments. I felt that their feedback and their own statements on the floor were helpful and I think brought to light. One of the senators even noted that if the state isn't willing to step in and help support our local jurisdictions in defending the state laws that are passed, small rural counties are likely to get buffaloed into just resolving cases because they don't have the financial means to defend them. And in fact, I think that we saw at least part of that with one of the lawsuits that was filed last summer, where all 44 of your county prosecutors in the state were named. And there were a couple of counties that right out the gates just said, we don't want to be responsible for any losses, so tell us where to sign and we'll just cede whatever your political agenda is. So they just went ahead and signed off and settled on day one. Most of the counties in that lawsuit have stuck together. The AG's office has also agreed to provide the defense in that instance. So although I'm tracking it, I'm following along, I'm having to review the briefing, provide input, comments, essentially assist in my defense. I luckily am not having to bear the burden of all of the defense, which is really helpful. But I mean, another great example of a case, I mean, that one I'm sure there's well over $1 million in attorney's fees in that case since last summer. And it's right in the crosshairs of litigation still. So I think the takeaway that I hope we can glean from this is twofold. One, really being proactive in anticipation of next year's legislative session to say, how can we grab that bill that died at the end of the legislative session this year and get it reintroduced right out the gate so we can get a solution in place. And then the second is really just to make you aware of, hey, there's another one of these lawsuits out there. There's a potential if we lose that there could be a significant amount of fees and costs. And if that's not something that we're willing to take on, then let me know. But otherwise, we're by default typically going to go on the defensive and defend ourselves. So,
What does the lawsuit want for what are they demanding? Just money? Are they demanding action?
Well, a number of things. Their prayer for relief has 5 components. Their first prayer for relief is a declaration that the entry and re-entry provisions within House Bill 83 are unlawful. Their second request is a preliminary and permanent enjoinment of the defendants from enforcing the entry and re-entry provisions of House Bill 83. A requirement that defendants direct their officers, agents, and employees to cease enforcement of House Bill 83. So essentially, I'm the defendant, so they want me to direct my law enforcement officers and my officers and agents of my county to not take action to enforce House Bill 83. Next, to grant the plaintiffs cost associated with the lawsuit, their attorney's fees and other expenses, and to grant any other relief the court deems proper.
So they would like our county to not cooperate with immigration authorities.
With the Trump administration directive in our state legislature's passage of a bill that our state has deemed appropriate to support the Trump administration's policy on immigration.
Well, I would go on the record saying I support the Trump administration's efforts to deal with the illegal immigration problem. So.
Yeah, because we don't even know what time. We don't know who's out there. What is this individual that they're protecting? Are they? That's the scary part too. We don't know.
Yeah, during my testimony I gave to our state senate, it was very clear that it's my desire as an elected official to be a partner with the state. If our state passes a law, I want to be able to support that. Whether it's support it in whole, support it in part, support it with a degree of discretion that I'll maintain as an elected official myself. It might look different from one case to another, but I think as a general rule of thumb, we all need to be working together. Whether that was a piece of legislation passed by a local city or a piece of legislation passed by the federal government, we want to be in a position where we can try to work together to support each other. And that's just a general rule of thumb. My plea to our legislature is, in order for me to advise my local elected officials to support the laws you guys are passing, you at the state level have to give us the tools to do it in return.
Exactly.
And so that was my plea to them. From time to time, you as commissioners will be named in these types of lawsuits. So it's not just unique to the county prosecutor. I would say your prosecutor probably gets named in more of them than any other elected official, just because we're the person responsible for deportation, responsible for prosecution, etc. But I don't think any of us are immune from it. So I think that it's a relevant issue to address on behalf of all of our elected officials. And, that's why by default, I always start when I receive these by saying, all right, what do we need to do to defend this? And then I take the step back and say, all right, if I'm not going to defend it, then what's my justification for not? And every once in a while, there might be a reason why we say, maybe it's not in our constituents' best interest to put up this fight. But as a general rule of thumb, if it's the defense of constitutionality of laws, I want to be able to defend those if they're defensible. So, in this instance, we've defended it to this point. We're only a few weeks in, but we're engaging in briefing. We're responding to plaintiffs' motions. We're filing our own, and we've got oral arguments that are queued up in the federal court already. So.
And this kind of is they're kind of pushing us into being a sanctuary city or sanctuary county. So if somebody agrees, let's say one of the other county drops it and says, well, we're going to knuckle under. Well, everybody's going to move there. You know, I mean, it's kind of they're kind of.
That's definitely an argument that could be made.
Yeah, that's.
Well, you have my support in fighting back.
Mine as well.
Because I'm just making you guys aware of it. So that way, if you guys hear rumblings and you hear that, the county or your elected prosecutor is involved in an ACLU lawsuit, this is the newest one. So this is the one that's hot off the press. That's a general summary of what it involves. And our action at this point is to defend our state legislature and the Trump administration's immigration policies. And so we're fighting it, but we're fighting it with the acknowledgement that if we lose, there could be financial consequences. So just making the county aware of it.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's 2 good briefings today. I feel smarter for the day. Thank you.
Me too.
You bet. Any questions from the commission?
No?
All right.
Any further questions or comments? No? Okay. We're adjourned.
Okay. Thank you.